All right. My pick, it's not going to surprise close listeners to the show, but I got to tell you, it's a crazy number. I'm going over the New England Patriots. Now, if you haven't seen the number yet, most of you probably have. Think about what number would be right to you. All right?
Write it down.
What's our number look like right now, Scott?
7.5.
Okay. Now, are the Patriots playing 15 games?
No.
They're playing 17. Okay. So the way I lose this bet is Bill Belichick loses 10 games.
Correct.
Or a tie, I guess, in theory.
That is very true.
10 games. So if they go under 500, I can still win.
That is correct.
Faz, make the K. So the naysayers, the poo-pooers, as I call them sometimes, well, I started just now. They say it's a tough schedule. But you just kind of debunked the whole schedule idea. They don't account for home. They don't account for away. But go ahead.
Well, they do play the toughest schedule in the NFL based upon the expected season wins of all their opponents.
Buffalo's inflated. Jets are inflated for sure, but go ahead.
So, but even when you adjust for that, it's worth, and you've done yeoman's work on this, it's worth less than a win. So if you assume New England's an average team, if they played an average schedule, they should be 8.5. So because there's a really hard schedule, they should be 7.75, not 7.5. 7.75.
Yeah, so Mackenzie and I did some work on this, and we figured to go from the hardest to average was about 0.75, and then the same 0.75 to go from average to the easiest. So 1.5 games between 32 and number one, and then obviously some fraction of that otherwise.
So the question you need to answer is there a cumulative negative effect for having to play tougher opponents over the course of the season? Because just adding up the individual games is not going to get you all the way down to 7.5. But if you have to stack harder opponents, do you get more physically fatigued? Is it more difficult? That's the question you have to ask yourself.
And I think that I see your point, but I also would say one thing. Belichick, the way they're tested by fire just generally, it feels like they gain. I think the Patriots gained. Remember they had that stretch when they played Tampa Bay in week 4, like Brady's first year, and then they played Dallas, right? And there was all
That's
these.
the one they lost on the last second field goal in the rain.
Yeah. It feels like the Patriots actually gained strength from tough games, but maybe that's just, me projecting on Belichick. But I also would say it matters how physical the teams are. If you're playing the Eagles, who they play in week 1, which I think is an advantage because you have all that more prep time in theory. Mm-hmm. But
plus, you get the Super Bowl hangover, so you get them the right week to
that's interesting.
To get them.
And so but if you look at it, it's funny. I'm going to kind of now give this out to some degree in the next couple of weeks. But I actually, and Mackenzie helped me with this. We got the whole schedule, all the lines were out, and then I did a solver on what would have to be the power rating to have the mean square error be minimized in every game. Because we had it for every game. So it was like, okay, let's assume that everyone's even. All right, what's a 0? What's the mean square? All right, now what they do is just by brute force make a team 0.1, 0.2, and they go through every permutation, and it gives you actually the power ranking of the team.
Based upon the spreads that are currently out there.
Yes.
Yep.
The biggest variance of all games, meaning the power rating that minimized the error, but it was off on this game, was the Philly-New England game, was off by 5 points, and no other game was off by much more than 3. It was crazy. There's something about this week 1 that they're really giving New England. What line did you see on that game? They're giving New England.
Philly's laying 4.5 to 5 right now.
And that game is where?
Game is at New England.
Okay. That's interesting. Maybe I don't remember because that's okay. So what, you haven't done your full power ratings, but where do you have New England generally? Right around even?
Yeah, again, I actually have my power ratings. I have them as 0.
Okay.
Even.
So we're assuming...
I have Philly 5 points better than average.
So what you're saying is you think if your power ratings are right, that I'm probably got a quarter game edge in this, and then the question is New England just a little bit better, maybe?
Exactly.
Is what I think.
Exactly.
Okay. And the reason I think they are is, one, I think Belichick's extra motivated. I'm sure we've heard, to some degree when you hit 70, 71, you're going to wonder how hard they work. And I think Belichick is want to stop this Brady narrative, like, oh, it was all Brady, passionately. Number 2, for the first time in memory, he made a real mistake, it seems. And again, I'll say it seems because I don't know all the details. But, the whole thing with the OC being a defensive guy, not to mention laminated paper and pencils in his ear. I mean, a lot of crazy things is they've run off. They've been both run off. Judge and I always forget his name. Patricia. And I don't. But O'Brien, who's a mighty good head coach. Forget GM, but a mighty good head coach. He's OC now. That is a big step up. They've actually hired a true line coach.
He's the one coach that you could give a crappy quarterback to, and he could still win 9 games and get you a wild card.
Think about some of those teams that he took the play. So to me, and Mac Jones, how much? Let's just say this. Mac Jones was worse in year 2. It's very rare that a quarterback's worse in year 2. How much of that was Patricia? I think, in theory, a lot.
And a lot of internal problems between him and Patricia, and some
maybe justified.
Yeah, maybe some with Belichick. But you know what? It sounds like as long as you have a good buffer with your OC, you're going to be fine.
First off, Belichick was mad at him. He wasn't mad at Belichick.
Yeah.
If he's mad at Belichick, he should just pack up his bags.
That's right.
Because how could you? But again, who knows, right? But if you stuck it out with Saban, you're probably okay, right? I mean, you're probably kind of tough, right? Yeah. So that's my rationale. I'm happy to hear the counterpoint. What do you think?
Well, the bottom line, like I said, I think it's a big benefit to be able to play in Arizona, Houston. You can exhale. You've got an easy week,
It's not like they don't have any easy games.
I know, but they've got far few easier ones than anybody else. So
no, that's not true. How much different how could their schedule be tougher with the third schedule in the division than it would be the number 2 schedule or the number 1? How could Buffalo have an easier schedule? Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
So maybe we should question right away some of these, in general.
Like I said, I'm gonna have to dig into the specifics because to use an example, like you get the Vikings. I mean, the Vikings aren't a 13-win team; they're an 8.5 win team.
But in general, if you look at the AFC, Kansas City's the one. So New England now maybe they play Kansas City anyway because of the division. I think they do now.
Yes, they do.
Okay, but now it's like you don't play Cincinnati. Because Buffalo is going to have to play Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think they'd play Baltimore in theory because they were the number 2. Yeah. So Pittsburgh's a much easier game than Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. So right there, how's Buffalo? I don't get it. So,
but it's all baked into the number, and the numbers say they're playing the hardest.
First off, you didn't do the numbers. You're looking at other numbers. Who knows what kind of numbers they got? But eyeballing their schedule, what seems to be like the thing that would be harder than Buffalo? Because right there, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh. Jumps out.
Yeah, at Pittsburgh. So,
but those are going to even out in theory.
What NFC division do they play?
They play the East, so they're at Dallas.
But so
so their swing game in the NFC is against the Saints, by example. So that's really unlucky that they
what? We just said the Saints are an average team. RJ, have an easy schedule.
Their swing games against the NFC. They only have one game against the NFC South, and they drew the worst possible option.
But what I'm saying is maybe against the NFC South, but the fact is they play an average team. How unlucky can that be?
Very, because all the other teams are well below average.
But Fez, I don't think you understand. We're not looking at it let's assume they're playing the NFC South, and we're looking at it more globally. They've got one swing game in the NFC, and it's against a dead average team.
Yes.
So that can't be that horrible, can it? I mean,
and what's illustrative is that, this game does show you why. The line on this game says you're going to win this bet.
Okay.
The Saints are lined at 9.5. Mm-hmm. Okay.
But we think that's because they have a very easy schedule.
That's right. So New England's line is 7.5. New England hosts the Saints. Home field is not worth 3, and New England's laying 3, and no one is in any hurry right now to take the Saints +3 in that game.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say you lose the advantage of the extra home game because that extra home game is an international game.
Well, I hate that for the Steelers whenever the Steelers have, but in general, it feels like Belichick's ability when they played in Mexico City and they dominate. Whenever there's these vagaries of travel or whatever, he seems to be on top of it.
I agree with that.
So maybe, but I agree. I'd rather it be a home game. It's a home game for them. So I don't like the fatigue angle on it either, just going overseas. But they got to bye the next week.
And it's surrounded by a pretty easy schedule because you're home against Washington.
How could that be?
You're home against Washington. Then you have to go to Germany to play the Colts. Then you come home for the bye week. Then you play the Giants. It's not like you're playing the Chiefs and the Bills.
Yeah. Yes, I like it.
Now, New York Jets. Right now, their current season win total is at 9.5. Mackenzie and I not exactly on board right now with the Jets. this morning on Straight Outta Vegas for Friday, RJ Bell actually sat down with AJ Hoffman, Scott Seidenberg, and he made a pretty good case for and against the Jets. So we're also going to include that here. But we're going to start out with Mackenzie Rivers. He's going to go ahead and kind of tell you guys how he's feeling about the Jets' current team total right now, sitting at 9.5 wins.
Yeah, the great RJ Bell got his Jekyll and Hyde going on SOVAM, and I could tell he was in a good mood. He wanted the optimistic side to win out. He wanted the Jets over, which, you know, a lot of fans in New York, a lot of people interested in the Jets, they want them to do well. They want, the Larry Davids and the Mike Greenbergs and the long suffering New York Jets fans to have a smiling day. And it's kind of historic where they are in the betting market right now. If you look at anytime they had a win total greater than 9.5 games, I know there was only 16 games for a long while. This is only the third time since 1995 they've expected to be this good. In 1999, they had just made the AFC Championship game, losing to Mike Shanahan's Broncos. They're expected to win 10 games. They only won 8. And you got to wait another 12 years. Last time they had a win total this high was 10 after the AFC Championship game in 2011, and they won 8 games. Very rarely are the Jets expected to be this good, and almost never do they live up to expectations, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. This is a 7-win team last year. They actually got lucky by our fourth quarter win share, a proprietary statistic that looks at, end of games are random. If you just look at your win percentage through the first 3 quarters and then the beginning of the fourth quarter, and you keep those percentages and you weight them appropriately, they were supposed to win 6.4 games. And they lost some close ones. They won a couple more close ones than they should have by our metrics. 6.4 games. Now they're expected to win 3.3 more than that, 9.7. You got to play a little extra juice on the over 9.5. And I just don't see it. I think they have a lot of things going for them that's kind of sexy, like maybe the best cornerback in the league, and he's only in his second year. Sauce Gardner just signed one of the better defensive tackles in Keenan Williams. Very hard for me to think that's how you build, or those are the cornerstones of a great team, a team that's in the hardest division, arguably, in the league. Maybe the AFC North is up there. And I just don't think they have the firepower to match those teams. They're going to have a great defense. They were number 5 by DVOA last year. All right, well, defenses, for one, aren't that sticky. A lot of times, like the Packers a couple years ago, have a great defense. Next year, they have an average defense. It's very hard to repeat that year after year. And even if you have a great defense, it's not that telling of performance. You look at DVOA, the top 10 defenses in the league, only 5 made the playoffs. Patriots didn't, Jets didn't. Broncos didn't even come close. They won 5 games. If you go on the other side, 8 of the top 10 offenses made it. Only the Lions and the Browns missed out if you're looking at the best offenses by DVOA. So I think, the Jets have young talent. They have a defensive coach that's been excellent on that side of the ball year after year since, I can remember, since 2018 at least. But there's a big question mark on the other side of the ball, and I don't think any of their moves have really solved it. They brought in a quarterback that's going to be 39. We've seen, I guess Brett Favre had like half a good season with the Vikings, or you give him that. All right, Brett Favre also didn't miss a game for 250 straight games. He was kind of a freak of nature, and that's one example. And the other example of a guy that's been this old and been this successful is Tom Brady. So it's very, very rare. And I think you look at veteran quarterbacks that have gone to a new team, very rarely do they do well. 65% of the time, I've been tracking this, 2016 till today, 65% of the time when you have a veteran quarterback start with a new team, they go under their win total. That's the baseline. So Derek Carr, I'm pessimistic. Matt Ryan last year, I was pessimistic. Russell Wilson last year, I was very pessimistic, ended up coming through for me. That's kind of where I'm at with Aaron Rodgers. Like, yes, he's been very good. He wasn't good last year, 26th by QBR. And now all of that comfort, he brought in Randall Cobb, who's hurt now anyway, Alan Lazard for a reason. He's trying to recreate that. I'm not sure if it's going to be there. Garrett Wilson's only, in his second year. Devontae Adams wasn't really good. He didn't have 1,000 yards for his first 4 years in the league. It took a while for that chemistry to get going. I don't think they have the time to do that. So, I'm pessimistic. And I think this is going to be the third time, 3 out of 3, that they've been expected to win more than 9.5 games, and they didn't even come close. Expectations are high in the Big Apple, and they usually fall short of that.
All right. Well, you said a lot there, Mac, and a lot that we could probably dig into and drill down maybe a little bit deeper. I think the first thing that you said that kind of stuck out to me was the win total for the Jets hasn't been this high in that long. And I guess you don't have to necessarily look this up, but just off of the top of my head, like the Patriots have ruled that division for how long? I mean, it's the Tom Brady, Belichick, 2-decade type of thing. And it's like, well, all right, that makes sense. Maybe the Jets wouldn't have never been, 9 wins or 9.5 wins. But, when's the last time we've seen the Bills as good as they are? When's the last time that the Dolphins have been maybe projected to be as good as they are? Even the Patriots aren't supposed to be like a bottom feeder team this year. Like this division to me feels like it's the strongest that it's maybe potentially ever been in the history of the league. And now the Jets are sitting right there, a little bit above the Patriots right now. I guess the easy way for me to ask you is like, do you feel that this is the strongest division that the Jets have had to face, maybe in like the history of the league?
Yeah, at least the modern history of sports betting. I'm looking at the win totals now. Last year, the average win total was 8.8. This year, they're all supposed to be better than 500. They're all supposed to be better than 9.5. I don't see it. And you talk about the history of it. The Bills were kind of a free square forever. They didn't make the playoffs for 15 years or so. And the Dolphins haven't been this good in recent memory. So, yeah, it's an interesting confluence of events. The Jets are expected to be better than they've been in 30 years, and their competition is objectively better than it's been at least in the last 20 years. So something's got to give among those two.
All right, so here's another thing that you said. You said that the top 5, top 10 defenses last year, half of them didn't make it in the playoffs.
Right.
And then you talked about the offenses, and it was like 8 out of 10 offenses, top offenses in the league all made the playoffs. I think the question we have to ask ourselves is the Jets defense a legit top 10 defense? And I think you and I could probably sit here and say that there's a very good possibility that the Jets defense is top 10. Let's just give them that, right? We don't have to dig in and argue about that. But the Jets offense is that top 5, top 10. I could sit here and argue and say, no, it's not. I think one of the reasons why is you bring in a new quarterback. And look, I get it. It's Aaron Rodgers. That's my dude. You know me, and everybody that listens to me on these podcasts knows that I'm a Green Bay Packer fan. I've been a Brett Favre guy my entire life, Aaron Rodgers guy all my life. So I'm not throwing shade on Aaron Rodgers. But there's a particular way that this dude acts and a particular set of rules that he needs to have in place, specific players that he needs to have on his roster. And I think, maybe he brought one in with Randall Cobb. I think that's a help for him. But I don't think this Jets offense is top 10. They're going to end up in a lot of shootouts. I think putting the Jets offense in the top 10 could potentially be a mistake. And that's my first reason to kind of draw back from thinking that this team could win 10 games.
Speaking of a creature of habit, a creature of comfort, the Jets brought in, they got rid of Mike LaFleur, they brought in Nathaniel Hackett, who was his quarterback's coach the last 2 times he won MVP just a couple of years ago. Well, Nathaniel Hackett never called plays in Green Bay. That was Matt LaFleur's job. He didn't get a chance to call plays. He did when he got that job with Denver. A lot of people thought that was a precursor for Aaron Rodgers going there. I think they probably don't hire him if it wasn't a possibility. He got the job in Denver, and he didn't call plays the whole season because he had to give that up. He gave it out to Clint Kubiak, who's now with the 49ers. In the 10 games that he did call plays, they obviously didn't do very well. They're one of the most disappointing teams in the season. Their defense allowed 17 points per game. Let me say that again. In the 10 games that Nathaniel Hackett called plays on offense, his defense was arguably the best in the league. They allowed 17 points per game. But how do you only win 3 games allowing 17 points per game? Well, when he called plays, his offense scored 14.5 points per game, 14.7 to be exact. That's his one experience calling plays. Now he's going to a team that was 26th by DVOA on offense last year. I know they were better with Breece Hall in the beginning of the season, and they kind of trailed off after that. Well, if you're relying on a first-year running back to be not the 26th best offense, I think you have other problems. And their offensive line is not much improved. PFF ranks them as 23rd. And so I don't see where the good comes from. You're right. They're going to have to beat the Bills and the Dolphins and very high-scoring teams. Regardless of how good their defense is, you're going to have to put some points on the board. I don't see what is even above average about their offense. Yes, Aaron Rodgers is one of the great, most talented quarterbacks of all time. Last year, he wasn't. Last year he was 26th out of 32 qualified quarterbacks. I don't think he improves massively. Maybe he's an average quarterback. If he's an average quarterback with Nathaniel Hackett calling plays with like a rookie and a second-year player as their number one, number two option, I don't see it. I think they're, if I had to project, I think they're the 23rd, 20th best offense, and those teams generally don't win 10 games. They generally don't make the playoffs.
I'm kind of with you there. I'm kind of with you with the 20. It's maybe, 15 to 20 range. I think that's probably fair. You talked about the Bills and you talked about Miami, obviously teams in their division. But let's talk about the schedule. We talked the other day about the Cleveland Browns, and you and I kind of both agreed with where the Vegas market was at with that they had like the 14th hardest schedule in the league. And that kind of gave us a little bit of optimism. And I think that this is the thing that really drives me to want to play the Jets under, Mac, is the schedule that this team has. It's absolutely brutal. In my rankings right now, I have the Jets with the hardest schedule in the league, bar none. And I looked at that and I'm like, all right, well, do they have enough, pieces and can the defense and offense get together and knock out some of these, tough, good teams that they're going to play? So what I did was I kind of wanted to take a look at last year, and I looked at the teams that had the hardest schedules, and there were a lot of teams on there, teams like the Rams and the Raiders and the Broncos, teams that were projected to probably have better seasons. And schedule matters. I think the schedule matters a lot. And if you don't have a top 10 offense, as we were just discussing, you run a pretty good risk of not making the playoffs. I'm going to run through some of the offensive teams that this team has to play. They have to play Josh Allen. They got to play the Philadelphia Eagles and Hurts. They're also going to see Patrick Mahomes, and they'll see Justin Herbert. They're going to see this Miami team. You got the Cleveland Browns with Deshaun Watson. Like, they have a lot of teams out there that have really good quarterbacks, really good wide receivers, really good running backs. This Jets team, to me, Mac, feels like you're going to have to win in a shootout. To be honest with you, Mac, it doesn't even start with the regular season. It kind of starts with the preseason for me. The Jets are going to be one of two teams that have to play 4 games in the preseason because they are going to play in the Hall of Fame game against, as we just mentioned there, the Cleveland Browns. So let's just call that like a short road trip. And then the Jets also have 2 other road trips in the preseason. One of them is going to be in New York. That'll be their final game. But they have to travel 3 times in the preseason. That's just to start out, getting into the regular season. And then they open up against the Bills. Then they have Dallas, New England, Kansas City, Denver, Philly. Like, that is a tough 6-game stretch. I don't know if they can win more than 2 games out of that stretch, Mac. So I don't know what you see with like the first 6 games, but I'll tell you right now, between the preseason and the first 6 games, this team's going to be ground down. It's going to be a battle each and every week for this Jets team. And if your quarterback doesn't have his stuff straight, I don't know if they can rely on that defense to commit enough turnovers, to hold teams to very low rushing and passing yards. Like, they're going to need to be the best defense in the league week in and week out. And we've seen defenses do that in the past. Baltimore Ravens come right to mind. This Jets defense isn't that good. So let me just dial back a little bit, Mac. First 6 games, what do you kind of envision right here?
Well, let's trust the Vegas market to give us some indication of how hellacious this first 6 games are. They're plus 1.5 hosting Buffalo, plus 2.5 at Dallas. They're finally a favorite in week 3, hosting the Patriots. And then this line, I know they're at home. They're plus 2 hosting the Chiefs. I kind of like the Chiefs there, to be honest with you. Then they go to at Denver. They avoid them in September where they're historically great. They're pretty good in October. It's funny. You chart the Broncos home court advantage. It's a very steady line that goes down. In September, they're great. In December, they're terrible. So they get a middle-of-the-road designation with an October meeting at Denver. They're -1. And then they're hosting Philly again. I kind of like the team that was just in the Super Bowl there. They're +1 hosting Philly. So you throw it all together, the implied win total for their first 6 games is 2.6. It's supposed to go 2.6 and 3.4. Obviously, that's not going to happen. You got to decide one of these games one way or the other. I think it's far more likely, looking at this slate, that they're 2-4. And if they're 2-4, the noise, the media machine, the back page in New York is going to be wilding out. And I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to like that. He's used to a very comfortable environment in Green Bay with a lot of love. That's where I think this season goes off the rails. If they lose to Philly, they fall to 2-4. Maybe they pick up wins, Broncos and the Patriots. Robert Saleh's, his seat's going to be very hot. They're going to be making drastic decisions. He probably needs to have a winning season this year to remain in that job, and it's going to be tough with this schedule. So I think, although technically by the Vegas market they're more likely to go 3-3, I see them starting out 2-4.
I'm kind of on board with you. I think 2-4 is fair. I mean, I could see them, maybe taking down the Patriots, maybe taking down Denver, maybe Dallas or something like that. But it's not going to be easy for this Jets team. Now, after the bye week, I think it gets a little bit easier for them team-wise. But I can argue, if you go through and you look at the Jets' schedule, that the only team that they really play that probably is taking a step back on their entire schedule might actually be the Washington Commanders. But the Jets have to play 2 sets of back-to-back road games, and it just the schedule really doesn't set up all that well for them. There's a brief period for week 12, 13, and 14 where they'll play Miami, who's going to be tough, where they'll play Atlanta, who a lot of people are much higher on this year than they were last. And they do get the Houston Texans, who, that's probably a layup. But one of the things that I like to do, especially when I'm playing overs, how many layups do you really have on your schedule? Mac, I don't know what you see. I see legit 1 layup on this entire schedule. And I think it's probably against Houston at home. That's the real only layup that I can say they're winning that game without a doubt. Maybe they could beat the Commanders in week 16, so maybe they have 2. I need a handful of games that I could go ahead and just start picking up and be like, they're going to win 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let me find these other 4 or 5 wins that I need. It feels to me like I have to find like 7 or 8 games that this team's going to beat. And when you're playing Buffalo twice, Kansas City, Philadelphia, the Chargers, you got to play Miami, you got to play in-division Patriots, it's Cleveland, it's a tough team in Atlanta who people are kind of high on. You got to play the Giants. Like, those are not easy games. Like, it feels like I'm really trying my best to go ahead and find 10 wins. With this schedule, I just simply can't do it.
I think maybe the only other layup you could argue is the Falcons. They're hosting them in week 13, but I'm not sure that's such a layup because the Falcons were the best, if not or top 5 running the ball last year. And the Jets, if there's a weakness on their defense, it's that they don't really do particularly great against the run. Sauce Gardner is not going to have anybody to lock up necessarily in that Falcons game. So if that's tricky, then, I mean, that's literally the only other layup outside of the Texans and the Commanders, which you mentioned.
So I think, to be fair here, Mac, I think the one thing that I kind of have to do is take this Jets team for who they are. And I actually went ahead and I upgraded this Jets team because this Jets team this year is better than the Jets team last year. I think the coaching is probably going to be a little bit better. As you mentioned, Hackett already. He's clearly going to be a lot better than the OC that the Jets had with Mike LaFleur.
Are you sure about that? I mean, I guess I'm a little partial to the LaFleurs because of the distant connection, but Hackett was probably as bad as anyone could be at that job calling plays last year. Sometimes changes for change's sake is good, but I'm not necessarily sure it's an upgrade.
I think where the upgrade comes in here, Mac, is that you have to be comfortable with not only the quarterback, but with the offensive coordinator that he has to work with. We saw what happened last year. And look, I get it. Like, you didn't have an Aaron Rodgers out there. Maybe that made Hackett maybe it made him look a little bit worse. So maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh. But I don't think that either of those guys are obviously world beaters. But I actually made a little bit of an upgrade. The fact that there's a better relationship, I think, with Hackett and Rodgers than LaFleur was with, let's just say, like a Mike White or a Zach Wilson. So I upgraded the coaching a little bit. And I think that the Jets actually, they shed some dead weight in some of the areas that they had issues with. Linebacker coach, I think the O-line, the offensive line coach got replaced. So I think coaching-wise, I kind of upgraded them a little bit. They shed some dead weight there. And they got rid of some young players that just never, they didn't transpire. And they got rid of some old crafty veteran guys that were just sitting on the roster, just taking up spots. So I had to upgrade them. One, you bring in Rodgers, you have to upgrade. I mean, it is what it is unless your team gets, unless the team falls apart around you. But I think the Jets actually built around Rodgers as much as they possibly can. So I certainly upgraded the Jets, but not enough to go ahead and get over 10 wins.
To their credit, there are some signs that their roster is that they're doing a good job with their roster. Like last year, after cut day, I think 6 of their players were picked up after they were cut. So they had 61 NFL caliber players. That shows you doing something right. They also recently traded Denzel Mims to the Lions for a pick. That shows they think they have 5 good receivers already, and they didn't think he'd have a chance to compete. But it's still around the edges to me. So, I mean, Rodgers is going to be the big glaring question. Did they improve? Is Rodgers good? It's the same question. Is Rodgers as good as he was a couple of years ago, I should say?
All right. So you just brought up the wide receivers, and I think maybe we should start there and move on from the quarterback. And I'll get in on Rodgers here in a little bit on why I don't think that this is going to work and why I kind of know that this won't work because I know Aaron Rodgers. But let's look at the weapons that he has. Garrett Wilson, very good. Offensive Rookie of the Year last year. That dude was nothing short than awesome. But they alienated every other single Jets receiver on that team. And those guys are gone. Elijah Moore's gone. Now you bring in Alan Lazard, who knows Rodgers. You bring in Hardman, who worked with Mahomes. And you also bring in a guy like Randall Cobb, and that's probably just, for, let's just say, team camaraderie, some veteran leadership.
Rodgers has got to have his arm around someone when he's leaving in Week 18, right?
That's true. Randall Cobb's not going to do anything this year. I'd be surprised if he caught more than 15 passes. That's my own honest opinion. Alan Lazard was never a top receiver in this league, and neither was Hardman. Why would the Packers let him go? If he was that valuable, the Packers would have done everything to go ahead and retain him. If Hardman was that good and he made that team so much better, why would Mahomes and the Chiefs let him go? I think those guys are honestly nothing better than average, and I think that that's kind of the wide receiver core outside of Garrett Wilson around Rodgers. And things didn't work so well in Green Bay. So if you're taking Green Bay's best receiver and you're bringing him along to New York, I don't see that working. Does that make any sense to you there, Mac? And I guess throw Hardman in there as well. As if he was that important and they won the title last year, like why would Mahomes let his best option go? And I think Hardman was one of Mahomes' best options last year.
It's a good point. Like the Chiefs have really no outside wide receivers of any note, and they let this guy go. So that shows you that they didn't even think he would necessarily be a needle mover for them. If you just look at PFF grades, and PFF has done a lot of work on which positions have outsized value. And generally, it's conceived that if you have a great wide receiver, that's great, but you're not necessarily going to reap the benefits of that unless you have a second receiver and really a third wide receiver that keeps defenses honest, where they can't just double and bracket and do everything that they're going to do. So if you look at the PFF grades, they have, count them, one wide receiver that was above replacement level. 70, I mean, they kind of skew these grades where really like 65 is average, but 70 is supposed to be the bottom line for what an NFL starter is going to be, a 70 PFF grade. Garrett Wilson, great rookie season, 12th best PFF grade for any wide receiver. He had an 83. You go down the list, you got to get to Randall Cobb at 70.0. Again, he's on the PUP list. He's probably not going to play very much. He was considered by PFF the best performing wide receiver of anybody in this group. So if defenses can slag off and guard Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard doesn't scare me. McCole Hardman doesn't scare me as a second option. So I think that's a big hole in their team.
I think it's a massive hole. Now, a lot of people are talking about, Breece Hall coming back and he's, going to go back to where he once was. I honestly don't see that. I think when you come off of a season-ending injury that it's going to take some time to go ahead and get the motor running. Rodgers didn't come here to hand the football off. They tried that with Breece Hall last year, and I think that that's one of the reasons why he ended up where he was at, because the Jets couldn't throw the ball effectively outside of, some crazy Mike White games. And I thought Breece Hall kind of got used up. So I'm not exactly on. There's talent there, but I don't think he's going to be used the same way that he was last year, and I don't think that that he's going to be able to produce the same way. So I'm not knocking him in any way, but this is a completely different Jets offense, and I just don't see the same running back, that we saw to go ahead and start out the year last year. Here's what I will say, though, about Rodgers there, Mac, is that I think in order for this team to actually thrive and to be what, let's just say, Jets fans are hoping for, because there is hope, right? I mean, I think that that's the one thing that the Jets fans are clinging on to is, we got Garrett Wilson and we got Aaron Rodgers, and we don't have to worry about, the Zach Wilsons and all that crap like that. Like there is hope there. But being a Rodgers guy, I know that the hope that I had at one particular period of time was that he was going to be an MVP quarterback. And I think that that's kind of where he needs to be. Like, those were the best years that the Packers had with Rodgers, an MVP type of year. And I think that Garrett Wilson is going to need to turn into potentially maybe the best wide receiver in the league. And that's what worries me about Rodgers, is that I know his past. When Aaron Rodgers had Jordy Nelson in the prime of his career and he lost him in the 2015 season, Aaron Rodgers, I don't want to say fell off a cliff, but when Rodgers was in his prime, that was one of the hardest years for him. Let's go back to last year. Devontae Adams, arguably one of the best receivers in the league. And at the time when Jordy Nelson was on top of he was easily one of the best receivers in the league, if not the best, when he had that one amazing year. Same thing with Adams. Adams is, I don't know where you would put him, Mac, but he's in the top 3 or 4 wide receivers in the league probably right now, talent-wise.
Well, let's take what Aaron Rodgers says about him. Aaron Rodgers says Devontae Adams, 1, period, big space, and whoever's number 2. He thinks he said, quote, he's in a league of his own. I mean, that's Rodgers talking specifically about Adams.
And we've seen that within the numbers with those 2 guys. That's his guy. That's his guy, and when he loses his guy, he falls apart. Well, how did Rodgers do last year with no Devontae Adams? He didn't do all that great. Well, he brought one of those guys, Allen Lazard, with him. So I think he needs to have like an MVP-type season. Garrett Wilson needs to have, let's just say, I don't want to say number 1, but he's got to be in the top 10. Like, he has to be a guy that Rodgers could rely on. Because I know Aaron Rodgers, if guys aren't in the right spots and the game plan is not working out right and the offense isn't putting up enough points, he's going to get really salty, he's going to get really pissed, and he's going to start to kind of, I don't want to say fall apart, but he's not going to follow the game plan. He's going to be abrasive with coaches. He'll be throwing the ball into the ground, especially if that offensive line isn't able to protect him correctly. And look, it's a new team. It's a completely different environment. Packers fans deal with losing differently than New York fans do. We never really ever really attacked our guy, but now it's going to be everybody. Everybody right now is trying to find, that headline for Monday morning, and who's the easiest target right now? It's probably the guy that's the most vulnerable. It's going to be Aaron Rodgers. So I just think that there's a whole mountain of stuff that's about to come his way, and he's going to need to be MVP level Aaron Rodgers in order to go ahead and overcome everything, overcome this particular type of schedule. I think the Jets defense needs to be top 5 in the league. Their special teams is going to have to overperform from what they did last year. I think that, they brought in Hardman, so he'll go ahead and return some kicks and stuff. But you're going to need Legatron to kind of be Legatron, and their punter and Morstead are just, kind of, I would say maybe a little bit just declining at their position a little bit. I can't see the Jets getting to 11 wins this year. I can't see them getting to 10. I actually think, Mac, that this could be a building year, that this could be a good thing for the Jets if they fail. And I'm going to go out on a limb, Mac, and I'm going to say that they're only going to win 7 games this year, 7-10. This schedule is absolutely brutal. And I think maybe an easier schedule next year, a year in the system with Hackett, with Rodgers, getting used to all the pieces, and maybe there's some light at the end of the tunnel where they ease up on Rodgers so much, because I'm telling you, if the media starts pounding on this dude, he's going to go on podcasts, he's going to end up on ayahuasca, he's going to end up in some dark tunnel somewhere, and it's not going to turn out good. And there's a good chance that he just might bail out and go, you know what, I'm out of here. I'm going to retire. I'm going to go try to, kick Blossom off of Jeopardy or something like that and do something different. So that's where I'm at with the Jets. I'll say 7-10. A lot of people might think that's crazy, but I do not see this working. And I think the biggest thing that nobody's talking about is how hard this Jets schedule is. And they're going to play the best teams in the league all year long. And I feel, Mac, honestly, like it feels like each and every week is going to feel like a must-win situation. And that's a lot of pressure to put on any team, even the best team in the league. So the Jets aren't that. So I'm going to say 7-10. That's kind of where I'm at right now.
Right, blind entry.
Yeah, mine was already face down on the table.
I'm not going to say I'm picking on AJ. This just happened, and now you have to suffer the consequences. I'll give you first handicap.
The Miami. Here's what I love about the Dolphins under here, particularly in the action points way that we're doing this. I think the Dolphins' floor is extremely low, and I think their ceiling is probably 10 wins. Like I think
their ceiling are 10 wins. Explain that. How many did they win last year?
9.
Okay. And how much was Tua hurt last year?
I missed 5 games.
Okay. So their ceiling's 10.
Yep.
How could that? So they've gotten worse. They must have a worse defensive coordinator.
No. But what we did see of the Dolphins was the last 4 games of Tua were probably the worst 4 games that he played all season.
Okay.
Which
so you
means
think he's now
I think he's damaged goods.
He's damaged the rest. So Ronda Rousey's a front runner.
Yeah.
And now Tua is damaged goods. He'll never physically be the same.
I think when
from
you have
these concussions,
multiple concussions in a year, I think that it can have long-term effects. And I think if one more concussion, I really think could be career-ending.
Now listen, here's the thing we got to acknowledge. When you go to medical school, it matters what era you go. So when did you go?
I've not gone.
Okay. So how do you have these strong opinions about concussions?
Because I've seen documentaries. I've seen enough fighters who get once you get knocked out enough times, you were not the same fighter.
Knocked out is different than having a concussion.
Tua was knocked out, like shaking on the field. Do you not remember that?
Oh, hold on a second. When you say a couple of times and knocked out, you're saying there was an instant it looked like he went unconscious.
Yes.
And then what else? I mean, what I'm saying, the one supposed concussion, he didn't even he played the next week. I mean, which again has caused a lot of controversy.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying. First of all, let's get something straight. Concussions are obviously potentially debilitating as people age. Also, I think I've had one concussion. I'm not sure. I never went, but I mean, I got, I don't know actually. I hope I didn't. I started acting very differently. It was like Vince Chase when he, remember that? But he started dating, what was it? Sasha Grey. Yep. Yeah. I think let's just say this. Maybe we should say this. See, I've never actually heard Tua was so much worse after. See, that's fresh. So, do you have numbers on that?
Yeah, his game log for the last four games.
Now, who they play to?
They played the Packers, QBR 25. At Buffalo, QBR 52.
Okay, I remember now. Okay, so this would have came after the Chargers had a game with them at some point right around here, right?
Yeah, same time, 28.2 against the Chargers.
What the thought is that the Staley, who is a defensive guy, came up with something that really hurt Dolphins. And if I'm not mistaken, it was about 2 or 3 weeks after that Miami started running the ball more, and all of a sudden they played very well. In fact, they had a game in Buffalo. They played very well. I'm just going by memory here. Am I remembering that right?
At Buffalo, they lost that game, though.
Well, yeah, they covered the spread.
Yeah.
And how did Tua do?
It was one of his 5 worst games of the season.
So what was the QBR?
52.9 QBR.
So that was one of his 5 worst, and he's better than average?
68.8 was his for the season.
But what I'm saying, better than 50 by definition is the average.
Yeah.
So he was better than average against the Bills.
Of his last 4 games, that was the only time he was over 30.
Yeah. So, and then was there any games that the Bills that Miami played after that Chargers game that didn't have Tua as quarterback?
Yes.
All right, how did they do that game? I just want to see how much it was the quarterback and how much was it, because I got no sense at any of the film guys saying Tua's just throwing the ball worse.
Lost to New England, beat the Jets 11-6, and then lost the playoff game against Buffalo.
And how many points they put up in that game?
31.
Without Tua?
Yeah.
Who was their quarterback?
Skylar Thompson.
The Bills weren't very good, were they?
They weren't very good last year.
They
were overrated last year.
You thought they were great.
I thought they were good. I didn't think the Bills were going to win the Super Bowl last year.
I often believe that there's one story that can encapsulate a person. You weren't here, Scott. The first year he's here, AJ, Steelers go into Bills' first game of the year, right?
Mm-hmm.
That year, I thought the Bills were
Pittsburgh's
really
a 7-point underdog.
Yeah, I had Buffalo in that game.
Steelers win.
Did you feel like you were on the right side?
Before the game.
Steelers win the game. Yeah. He comes in the next game and goes, man, Bills, good game from them. I think they just got unlucky. He somehow converted a 7-point favorite, lost.
Yeah.
Although I did get 6, so at least I got the CLV in that game.
There you go.
Congrats.
Can you buy anything with that? Now,
Fez would say it was a good bet.
So your theory is, we're just giving Fez shots.
Yeah.
That's the game today, right?
I'm going to be interested. I'm going to listen the next time I miss now. All right. So you think it's Tua's just broken and he can't play good. So the Miami, why do you think they're retaining him? Why do you think, do you think the Dolphins know this?
I think they have an idea that he's on his last.
There's two different conversations. One is what happens if he has one more concussion, and the other one is he broken?
If the Dolphins cut Tua after all the heat they took for letting him play after he was clearly concussed, I think the Dolphins would have opened themselves up to some serious litigation.
Well, first off, when you
I haven't been to law school, but
when you say clearly concussed, well, apparently you're talking about litigation. You're talking about the
concussions.
It's amazing.
I'm not a lawyer
or
a
doctor and a lawyer.
It is wild.
I mean, and you didn't even graduate high school, right?
No.
Well, you got a GED.
Yeah. No, that's not true.
But you went into the service when you were 17.
I did. I graduated high school at 17.
You were like Doogie Howser, graduating early?
I was young for my class.
Okay. It all doesn't. It's like, you ever notice when there's parents that were married for 23 years, but the kid's 24? And then when they start looking at the math, everyone just hushes up and moves on?
My son's figured that out now. My older one.
It's like, but the gestation period is 9 months, right, Mom?
It's weird.
It's
weird math. I was like, they're just not teaching you guys right anymore.
You and the high school graduations is the same thing. But listen, I think if you get the equivalency, it's the same. It's equivalent.
Aren't you an August birthday?
September, yeah.
Okay, but were you either really young or really old in your class?
I was really young, yeah.
Could
you imagine me at 4, them saying, "Don't"?
But you didn't graduate at 17?
Yeah. Well, yes. I didn't turn 18 until September.
Okay.
I understand. I wouldn't have made some big. I didn't say I went to Ohio State when I was 17. I mean, I was 17 for a couple weeks of that. I guess I could. I just don't want to lie.
What are you, Doogie Howser or something?
See,
more like Doogie Howser.
But I wouldn't do that.
That's something to brag about, though. I went to Ohio State when I was 17.
I know. Maybe I missed the boat on that. Because I knew that AJ was in the service at 17 before I even knew his last name. All right. Scott, you follow the media pretty closely. Did AJ, have you heard much about Tua's just now not a good quarterback?
No.
Yeah, so you got a theory here.
I do.
All right, and the numbers might back it up, though it does seem to run, not contrary, but the same as the whole idea that the head coach finally learned to run the ball, and now this counter, they're ready for it. Because I think the Bills probably, them putting up as many points as they did against the Bills in the playoffs, that sign that offense was ticking.
Yeah.
Listen,
the Dolphins are considered the front runner to get Dalvin Cook, so the offense could even improve further.
Now, what's your thoughts? Because as I said, what's your thoughts on the defense? Pretty good last year, not great, good, and now though they got maybe the best defensive coordinator in the game.
Yeah, I do. I think their defense is going to be legit. Most of my bet hedges on. Who's got the two best receivers? You say 1 and 2. Who's got the two best receivers in the NFL? The Bengals.
What?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Explain that.
I mean, Jamar Chase is probably the best.
That's just not true. I mean, if you ask a lot, let's just say this. If you ask 20 serious NFL guys, if Chase has more than Hill, I'm surprised. If it's more than 10% of Hill, I'd bet you 50,000.
Okay.
So I think that it's fair to say some people think Chase is the best. I would say more.
I think Jefferson. People would say Jefferson's the best.
I think Jefferson. I think it's Jefferson. I think it's Adams. I think it's Hill and it's Chase. Those are the 4 that seem to be, unless I'm missing someone.
Cooper Kupp?
Huh?
Cooper Kupp?
No, they put him in the second tier. Though his season 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I've just listened to 2 shows, one from The Ringer and one from Athletic, where they rank the receivers. So there was extended conversation about it. I'm not saying I have any great insight, but I'm saying from those experts. And these are guys that watch tape. I really respect the guys that watch tape. But let's call them even. I mean, I think that's consensus. So with the number 2s, how would you rank it? I think that you could say the Bengals are the top 3 receivers, maybe. But go ahead.
I mean, I get Jalen Waddle's probably better than T. Higgins.
All right. So you're saying you think that Chase is better than Hill to a greater degree.
I guess so. But it's hard for me to judge these receivers without taking into account who's throwing them the football. And Joe Burrow makes those receivers look better than Tua is going to make his guys look.
Okay, except Tua, before he got hurt, and again, let's assume you're right about the thing about concussions are there might be lingering effects, but sometimes those lingering effects don't linger forever.
Sure.
People say it takes 3 months or whatever. Again, it doesn't seem like there's any super hard science about what the exact right answer is, because if there were, it feels like the NFL would have to do that, right?
Yeah.
you believe that if Tua gets one more concussion, that he won't play the rest of that year?
I think he won't.
Will you be rooting for it?
No.
But almost.
Almost.
If you could snap your fingers and him have the most mild no. If you could snap your fingers and he would retire by his own volition.
Like Andrew Luck?
Like Andrew Luck. But he wouldn't do it like 3 days before the season started.
He'd do it today.
Yes. Would you snap your fingers?
Yeah.
You'd end his career.
Yeah.
For your little bet.
No. For his own health.
You'd be doing him a favor?
I'd be doing him a favor.
Okay.
Protecting him.
Sweet. You're a sweet man.
I'm a nice guy.
It just happens to cash your bet.
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt.
Well, that segues to an interesting question. Who's the best backup quarterback in the NFL? And I might propose Mike White.
Oh, I would not.
Really?
No.
That's interesting. Mike White.
You don't think? Because remember now, Mike White, after he got hurt, played like a game and a half or something, wasn't as good. But in theory, in hindsight, he was hurt. Like they're saying the Jets locker room was blown away by his toughness. You heard that too?
Yeah, it was really hurt. He got murdered in that one game.
And how did Mike White do prior to that injury?
400 yards a game he was throwing for.
Yeah. So now I'll propose again. Who's better as a backup?
Andy Dalton.
And
Taylor Heineke.
3 years ago?
Taylor Heineke.
You're crazy.
Trey Lance.
Gardner Minshew.
You like all those more, Mike White?
Yeah.
You saw Minshew play last year, right? You like that better?
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, you got the bat for you. You got a good bat then.
And listen, the Dolphins' schedule is not easy. AFC West and NFC East, that's two tough divisions for them to have to play. So I think that over the course of the season, again, I think if Tua gets hurt, he's done. I think even if he doesn't get hurt, I think this is a 9 or 10 win team.
So if he gets hurt, maybe 6.
I think if he gets hurt early, I think it could be disaster. Yeah.
6.
Yeah.
All right. I tell you.
Do you see a way that they win 12, 13 games?
For sure. I think they might be the best team in the league.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, if Tua plays like he did last year before he got hurt, why aren't they the best team in the league? I mean, let's put Kansas City in their own category because it's hard to judge. Mahomes is so good. I mean, I think if you look at the rest of the roster, what is Kansas City's roster other than Mahomes? Are they even top 10? Especially with Kelsey's age, at some point he's going to hit the wall.
Chris Jones is elite at tackle.
I agree. But I mean, the Falcons have it. I mean, what I'm saying is that's what we're saying now is they got, an aging tight end and one good D tackle. And then what? The O-line's pretty good. Right? They spent some money. So what I'm saying is Mahomes is a different thing, right? There's no more debate about who's the best quarterback.
No.
Yeah, and I mean, and even 2 years ago when it looked wrong because Mahomes actually had a slightly down year 2 years ago, but I said all these quarterbacks, there's only one that I'm sure of, remember?
Yep.
And
then he followed it up with like the
most
questionable year. It was still a great season.
Yeah, in hindsight, it was pretty darn good. Yeah. So, okay. Mackenzie, do me a favor. Let's let money speak. We've been exploring this lately. Maybe we don't need to judge players. We need to look at their contract, and that will tell you how good they are. Right? The league is pretty good at assigning value. Give me the list, and I know it will take a minute, of the highest paid backup quarterbacks.
Got it.
I'm interested to see where White fits into that. I think White's a good backup, one of the best, if not the best. I think that...
Didn't Sam Darnold get money, though? Sam Darnold got a bunch of money.
Well,
right?
That was Carolina's stupidity. But you're right. In general, you can't look at the contract number. But remember, here's the thing, too. Apparently, and I'm not saying this is a joke, apparently there's real serious thought that even if Purdy, you knew what I was talking about, that Sam Darnold might be the starter. So, I mean, I don't think that's likely, but there seems to be a love affair going on.
Hey, he's got a short 5 or so game history with Christian McCaffrey.
Oh, that's
the two of them together.
Yeah, but I mean, Kyle also is so good, I think, at the play calling stuff that it's almost like if you notice, I picked another over. Mm-hmm. As I told Fezzik, I'm picking 4 overs because he's so nitty under that I want to buck. I want to buck that closed-mindedness. So I'm just going 4 overs. Maybe, except if I do the Steelers, it can't be over. We'll see. Maybe I'll make out a bonus pick or something. All right. Any progress, Mackenzie?
Trey Lance, if he's a backup, is the highest paid backup at $9.5 million.
Well, he's the highest paid third stringer.
Exactly.
What's Jameis making?
Well, let's just hear the list.
Okay.
I'm just crossing out the non-starters. Do you guys want to do cap hit or total cash?
Whatever you think is most telling.
All right. Let's do total cash.
That doesn't make any sense. We know that cash gets manipulated, right?
Let's do cap hit.
Yeah, let's do cap hit.
All right. Mike White is, though, let's see, 1, 2, 3, the 11th highest paid backup quarterback.
All right, so Tyrod Taylor is number 2 behind Trey Lance. Well, again, third string. Trubisky, boy, Pittsburgh's paying Trubisky too much.
Well, they thought he was going to be the starter, remember?
They didn't. I mean, they thought maybe, but they sat him really quick. Heineke? Wow. Sam Darnold. But see, that's probably an old contract. Was that a new contract?
It was a new contract.
My God, did the 49ers get took there?
And Sam Darnold
We have
takes
one of the
everybody.
lowest paid QB rooms in the out of the 32 teams.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean just because you won $300 playing blackjack doesn't mean you have to like buy like a $60 shirt of Jerry Seinfeld if you go to the show that night, right? I mean,
You wouldn't think so, but
No.
I might.
Winston. See, I'm going to make the case Colt McCoy is a starter this year.
I mean, Trubisky was signed as a starter as well.
Yeah, maybe. That one's close. The Tyrod Taylor gets a lot of respect. When's the last time he played well? He was playing horribly with Houston.
He played well with
For
Buffalo.
one game. Yeah, when they made the playoffs like 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Case Keenum is dropped. Well, that's interesting. Huntley made the Pro Bowl. And Andy Dalton is down there at $2.1 million. AJ, you would have snapped him up.
He's a value.
He was $10 million when he was with the Bears. So I mean, he's really dropped off. So I would make the case. We know he's better than Trey Lance. Trubisky, you could see. Listen, when you're pedigreed like that, people believe in you a long time because you got the physical skills. Heineke, I mean, Heineke probably had. If we went over under yards passing this year, Heineke or the second year guy, who's taking Heineke?
I don't think Heineke plays.
Well, see, that's the thing. I think that this whole thing. Why do you have such an expensive backup if you're so sure about your third stringer or whatever? Right. I mean, I don't know. It just does feel like the teams that are shaky at number 1 usually get robust at number 2, right?
I'd take Heineke plus 110.
Yeah, I think I mean, what I'm saying is it does feel like that these contracts were signed. I mean, Mike White was the clear backup, but still, they got a good deal on Mike White. I can't believe the Jets didn't want Mike White for $2.7 million.
Well, then what are you going to do with Zach Wilson?
Whatever.
I know, like he's still paying him.
Remember, you got 3 quarterbacks now because of the way that's going.
Yep.
That Purdy rule now. So you need 3.
The Jets' third quarterback is Tim Boyle.
I mean, let's be honest. Aaron Rodgers gets hurt sometimes. Mm-hmm. Do you really want Wilson as your backup?
No.
When you have Super Bowl ambition?
Mike White played 4 games last year. He won the first one, dominant fashion.
Well, let's be clear. After he got hurt, he was physically unable to perform. He was just so gutsy. So let's talk about the games before that.
Okay. Well, he only played 4 of them.
Okay. Yeah.
So the first game was against the Chicago Bears, worst defense in the league.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They won 31-10. He had 3 touchdowns, no picks in that game.
He's sitting in Fezzik's seat. No, remember, the Bears beat, I think right around that time, they beat the Patriots really bad on Monday Night Football.
Okay.
So beating any NFL team takes something.
Sure.
I mean, who'd the Bills lose to 2 years ago? Like a bunch of field goals in the game. It was like 15-12 or something.
That game?
Jacksonville,
It was
wasn't it?
Jacksonville, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, go ahead.
They lost to the Vikings, and his QBR was 21.4.
Mm-hmm. That was the next game?
That was the next game. Mm-hmm. They lost to the Bills.
You know, I should have never taught him QBR. Because now he never looked at QBR if his life depended on. Now it's like gospel. It's like God came down from the hill.
QBR I always looked at. DVOA is the one that you taught me that I use a lot. Buffalo 54.5 QBR, another loss. And then
so first off, do you really think that quarter wins are not a quarterback stat? Have you ever heard that phrase?
Yeah.
So why are you leading?
Okay, how about this? He didn't throw another touchdown after they played the Bears.
Okay, so how many of these games were after his injury?
1.
Okay. And then how many other games? So you're saying he played 4?
He played 4 games.
So he against the Bears. So one game he didn't throw a touchdown.
He threw 3 in the Bears game.
Okay, and then in one game he didn't before he got injured. Because
2 games.
So you're saying after his first game, he didn't have a touchdown?
After his first game, he didn't have a touchdown.
How did they score points?
I don't know.
I mean, how many points did they have in these games?
22, 12, and 6.
I tell you, my observations were a lot better. How about yours, Scott?
Well, in 2021, he had a decent run where,
maybe that's some of what's lingering for
where
me.
he beat the Bengals, that 34-31 game where he threw 405 yards. And then, he played small portion of the game against Indy, and then he played against Buffalo, 251 passing yards and a loss.
I tell you, I maybe I'm being a little bit affected by that Randy Mueller, who's a GM now, who's now writing full time for The Athletic, and he's getting in a lot more. It seems like he's more conversations. He's involved, or at least people are referencing him. He said Mike White. Now, he's a guy that was a talent evaluator in the NFL for like 25 years. He was a GM with the Saints, but multiple times he's been a GM, more than once. Okay, so this guy is pedigreed.
Sure.
He's in his, I think, early 60s, so he's maybe, a little past it in that regard, though he was the GM of the Seattle team in the XFL this year.
Sea Dragons.
Yes, that's it. And, they're the ones that started out with a bunch of turnovers and everything. And he said Mike White to him can be an NFL starting quarterback. Like, these guys can watch, and in theory, they can't tell you who will be, but they can tell you who can't. There's certain quarterbacks that just don't have the physical skills to be a starter. They can come in for a half a game or what. He says that Mike White's not limited. He could be a starting quarterback if the rest of it came together. That stuck with me. Like Scott said, in the years past, I am not sure that Mike White in the right situation, because let's be honest, the Jets don't have a great coaching staff on offense, as far as I can see. I'm an optimist on Mike White.
I could see that.
But let me ask you this. If you really thought Tua was one concussion away from being put on the shelf for the whole year,
Yep.
don't you go for the best backup you can get?
Yes.
And the fact they went for a guy that was $2.7 million, does that tell you one of two things? They believe he's the best backup, no matter the price, or they have a lot of faith. You can have faith Tua won't get concussed, but they got a plan that if he gets concussed, he takes the normal rest and he's ready to go.
How many of these guys were available this offseason, though?
I mean, backups are usually available. And if you want to trade, there's not many teams that won't take if you give a 5th round pick, you're getting pretty much any backup you want. Unless he's being like Trey Lance. I mean, they were trying to shop him hard this offseason by all accounts. No takers. Because you think about it, that's a lot of money to pay.
Yeah.
For a 3rd string quarterback.
Looks like of the guys available this offseason, it was Taylor Heineke was available.
And you think he's great.
Well, I think he's better than Mike White.
And so what does it say? The Dolphins said no thank you to Heineke.
Yeah. It says they believe in Tua.
And let's agree to the following final point is if you're a backup that wants a chance to start, don't you go to Miami?
Sure.
The theory is there's a good chance he doesn't finish the year.
For sure.
I think, here's what I know. Shanahan is a very intelligent coach. And I always forget his name. What's his name, the Miami guy?
Mike McDaniel?
McDaniel was considered the smart guy. Now, imagine Kyle is in the room and we're talking football and it's like, yeah, that's the smart guy.
Yeah.
All right. So right there, and we've talked about this once, Mackenzie, in general, there was a lot of appreciation for his mind, right?
No doubt.
And again, this is with me saying it's unequivocal that Kyle's, one of the brighter coaches, it seems. So, and again, you got some smart people. I mean, listen, they're making so much money now. You got smart people, NFL coaches generally. I feel like he learned a lesson. And I think it was meaning with the passing so much, they had to have a run game. And then I also think bringing in a senior, I go back to the Rams and when Wade Phillips was the DC. And the boy genius comes in as he was called, or I guess still is to some degree. And they said, defense, that's yours. I'm the head coach of the offense. But then a couple years goes by and he gets a handle on things. Then it's time for Wade to go off into the sunset.
Yeah.
I think that's smart. Man, when things are coming at you fast, you're in a new role. If your responsibilities are spread thin, you got no chance. But if you can focus, you got a chance. I don't think that Miami did that last year, and I think it hurt them. and now you've got a senior guy taking over the defense. You can let him focus on the offense. I think it's a really good hire. I think it's.
I don't think you could have done a better job hiring, because Boyer clearly stunk the defense just stunk in general last year, and it was obvious that McDaniel's not involved in that. And he said, I need to bring someone in who can take this off my plate. And I think it's smart.
You make an interesting point. You either got to spread yourself too thin, or you neglect something that needs attention. Yeah. It's one or the other.
Yep. And not everybody can be Bill Belichick and have your hands on every part of the game.
No one's Bill Belichick. But yeah, I mean, you're right. And again, Tomlin's not coaching the offense, but he knows enough to know what question.
Yep.
I mean, as someone who's had direct reports and have some managerial experience, is you don't have to be able to do the job as well as them. You have to know what questions to ask.
Yep.
And to me, Belichick first of all, Belichick could coach any position in the top 5% of the league. No, I have zero doubt of that. But you don't have to be that to be a Tomlin, let's say, that knows the offense well enough to ask the right, why aren't we doing this?
Sure.
Last question. We've been talking about quarterbacks. It seems like Miami with Tua is an interesting question. What was their record last year with Tua?
Let me pull it up.
Because my thinking, it was mighty good.
Yep.
Because Tua was an MVP candidate.
8-5.
8-5. What was the losses?
Green Bay, Buffalo.
Well, slow down.
Green Bay.
What was the score of that game?
26-20.
I don't remember that game.
Late season, Christmas Day, in fact.
It was Christmas Day, and Tua played the whole game?
That's the game Tua got knocked out of.
So that wouldn't count, would it?
I mean, he threw the majority of the passes in that game. He played the majority of the game.
And that's interesting. But if I recall now, wasn't this a huge fourth quarter comeback by Green Bay?
It was 20-20 going into the fourth. Green Bay scored the last 6 points.
Okay, so who scored the points before 2020?
It was 20-10 Miami at halftime.
So I'm exactly correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks for saying no to what was exactly right.
Well, I did. I mean, I was just looking at the.
You said something that was misleading that you thought contradicted my point.
They had a 20-13 lead at halftime, but Green Bay scored the last 16 points of the game. You're right.
All right, so. And Tua wasn't in the fourth quarter when it was tied going in. Seems kind of important.
Okay.
What do you say? So let's eliminate that
8-3 in games that he started and finished.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And and all of his numbers were tops of the league.
Yeah. So let's agree to this. If Tua plays most of the games, this is almost a lock to the over. You only have one out.
I agree with you.
This is very macabre. Your only out is someone's injury.
Yeah.
And you're comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with that.
All right. Next up.
Well, he wants him to get hurt for his own good sake.
Oh, that's a good
No, I don't want him to get hurt. I want him to retire today.
Imagine, the guy dreamt his whole life to be an NFL.
And he was.
That's what happens, Scott. A little lesson when you have a kid is when they hold their emotions so in, they start to feel foreign to emotion. They start being angry at people with emotions. Who cares about Tua's emotions? Right? All right. Does that cover the NFL?
Yeah, that covers it.
And I will say this about what's coming up at the NFL. I have a humongous pick that's going to irritate AJ. This is going to make him so mad. I'm actually picking my fourth pick today because we can pick it today or tomorrow or next week if you haven't missed, because you had to have 4 over-unders, 4 of them. And I've got 3 in the books. Scott has 3. Mackenzie has 3. And Fez and AJ have 2.
The vacationers.
The Wally Pippers.
Yeah.
and I think that you're going to find mine interesting, AJ.
Okay. Is it another over?
I can't say.
Okay.
I think we all know what it is.
He's been bold 3 overs so far,
I know.
spitting in the face of Fez's logic.
That's what I like to do. I like to be stubborn,
Yeah.
And if I can even break even being stubborn, I like that better than playing the cliched stuff and winning. I know that sounds wrong, but when you've won as much as me, it's just, you'd rather.
And if you have an urn with more white marbles than black marbles, and RJ Bell can tell you which
I think
black
we changed
marbles.
those to red and blue.
Yes, thank you. If you've got an urn with more blue marbles than red marbles, and RJ can tell you the red marbles that really are blue marbles, now you got a whole lot of blue marbles to choose from, and that's good.
I guess that's a compliment. I was going to say, so says the middle manager. But, now that I think that wasn't so bad, so I'll let it go.
Okay.
I still said it, but, All right, let's start. Why don't we, I can't even tease this. I'm just going to start it. It's good. This involves the Bills. Give me your take, AJ, on the Bills right now.
I am
lower on the Bills than I was last year, and last year I was lower on the Bills than I was the year before. So I think the Bills window is rapidly closing.
How are they suffering this year? How are they you bearish on them? For what reason, I guess?
Von Miller is paid more than he's worth at this point. Josh Allen's contract, this is the year where he starts to become a big hit on the
Yeah, but they
team.
got the players they got.
Yep.
Like, I mean, it's not like they're going to have to cut someone between that. So, like, with their current roster, not playing capologists, right? Which we don't have. I mean, we have basic insight into it, but what is it about? I mean, how much worse is this? I mean, isn't this team better than last year's?
No. The big hope was
once Von Miller got hurt last year, isn't Von Miller being healthy making this team better than last year?
He could. He could. What I would say is they would hope to upgrade the wide receiving core this offseason. They didn't.
They got a move tight end.
Okay.
Right? So who's supposed to be? He's like a receiver.
But Stephon Diggs, if his trajectory continues, is I don't know if he's even a top 10 wide receiver in the league anymore.
It's interesting. Now, the Ringer just did their top. So there's been 3 different sites that's done their top receivers. The Ringer had now this was I can't remember. The dude who always talks quarterback, Steve Ruiz or some variation of that, and the other dude, the fast talking dude, did one, and they actually had Diggs 5.
Wow. Last year, I wouldn't have. I thought that Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Deebo Samuel, Stephon Diggs were in that same group.
They had Chase like 8th.
I would. Wow. If they think Stephon Diggs is better than Jamar Chase, they didn't see many Bills games last year.
But was it the problem with Diggs, or was it he wasn't getting the ball? Because that seems to be the argument now, is he's very upset about not getting the ball in the second half of the year.
He should consider getting open more often in the second half.
So you're able to watch that, and see if he's open or not?
I mean,
the NFL Open is hard to even glimmer, right?
You know, pursuant to address that as far as the numbers, I took a look at Diggs. And his when he was thrown to, he was good. They completed like 2/3 of the time.
First half of the year, especially.
But this, exactly. But over the course of the year, you can make the case that he's right. They didn't throw to him enough, because you look at the number 2 wide receiver, Gabe Davis. They threw to him. He only just over half of the passes to him were completed. That's terrible, absolutely awful. So when you think about it, Diggs is the guy that. He's getting such more usage. You would expect that the percentages would be comparable. They're not even close. It's like 2/3 of the passes to Diggs get completed, and just over half to Davis.
So this is production versus efficiency, and you're saying as production goes up, typically efficiency suffers.
Yes.
You're saying it's the opposite. Diggs has better efficiency and better production.
Yes, although Davis does have a really nice yards per play, but it doesn't make up for the fact that half the passes that go to him are incomplete.
Per catch,
Per
right?
catch, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, PFF still has him as a top 5 guy last year, so I'm surprised at that.
Well, maybe you're just a typical fan that when things don't go exactly your way, you start to hate on the team.
It's entirely possible.
All right. I'm going under Bills.
I agree with you.
All right.
And I got one factor.
I agree with you also.
Okay. Well, no, you just said you're neutral.
But you go.
You said I'm not bullish.
I don't want to
That's
step.
not saying you like the under.
I'm not going to step on your reason. You go, RJ. You
go ahead. Go ahead.
One factor. Josh Allen can't keep running like he's been doing. That's my. I really think this is huge. Why? Because Cam.
He's come into the mini camp saying, "I know I can't do that. If I get hurt, I'm not going to heal as quick." Remember, he hurt that elbow. Didn't have to get surgery, but that was a whole off season of deciding surgery, not. I mean, I think that spooked him a little bit.
Yeah, and you hear it all the time. Oh, he's a big guy. He can handle Cam Newton. No, big guy. No problem. Then boom. Never the same. It's just a matter of time. You take enough hits, you're going to be compromised, and I really think that's going to be a major problem for a team that doesn't run the ball well and relies on him to shoulder the load. And I got one receiver, Diggs. I mean, it doesn't look like an 11-win team.
Now, if you think about the model of this bet, who's one of the most extreme relying on one-person teams in the NFL? Right? You could say Mahomes is right up there, though I'm not even sure. I think with Andy Reid and I think he's probably worth a little less Mahomes than Allen relatively, right?
Kansas City can win a playoff game if Mahomes can't play the second half, but Buffalo can, right?
So I would make the case Buffalo's right at the top as if let's just say this. If we combine how big is the absence with how likely the injury is, that the Bills, and Allen's going to be number one. Does anyone debate that?
That's a great point. If you're making the chart of likelihood of injury with importance of the player, that Josh Allen's right at the top of that curve.
I'd put Jalen Hurts in that conversation too.
Sure.
And Lamar Jackson.
But then again, we haven't really seen the whole Jalen Hurts thing. They didn't need those wins.
Lamar's backup made the Pro Bowl.
Yeah. With the Jalen Hurts thing, it's like when he went down, they didn't need those wins. So it's hard to judge team motivation.
With Minshew, in theory, they had a good backup situation.
Yeah, but now it's Mariota.
But either way, let's just say one of the top.
He's near the top.
Yeah, they're the same. You're right. They're the same.
Number two, and this isn't official. I don't know the heuristic of this.
The what?
But the heuristic.
The what?
Look it up.
It's a made-up word.
Don't worry. Yeah.
I know it.
I believe the Bills are cracking up. I truly do. Now,
because they can't get past Kansas City?
No. Kinda. So think about it. Did you know, and I didn't know this, that McDermott took over the play calling only once during, not last season, but the season prior, and it was the 13 seconds against Kansas City?
Oh, no. I did not know that.
Yeah, he came, he goes, I got this. And that is unbelievable.
Here's what we're going to do. Not cover Kelsey.
Good God.
And Frazier left over this effectively. I mean, the DC left.
If they mortar kick to the two, they win.
I've heard that
a couple times.
All right, but think about this now. They're better. That was their best team. I mean, the way that offense was clicking. Remember, they had just beat New England, like scoring 7 out of 7 possessions. They came in and put up 35 against KC. They have a late game, and there's like 13 seconds left, and somehow he says, "Give me that headset." And now that coach is gone. He played out last year. Then it was like, I'm out of here. And now you got this Diggs thing. Can we what is this about? This is about, by all accounts, he wants more catches, all right, or more opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Targets, as they say. Okay. Well, they just drafted a tight end with the theory being they're going to go a little bigger because as everyone now, if they run this too high, you got to be able to run the ball. Well, how do you run the ball? You go multiple times. Now, maybe he's the second tight end. So you got like a blocking tight end. And they're drafty,
Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid's the new guy, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who knows how they're going to do it? But at the time of the draft, if you go back and listen to ESPN's coverage, it was like this is along the lines of their effort to get bigger up front. They want to run the ball more. They don't want Allen running the ball nonstop. And now you got an instrumental player, the second most valuable player on the team. It's not even close. I think Diggs so mad that he's got the coach coming in. And you guys seen this, I'm sure, saying, yeah, I'm very upset that he wasn't on the field today. But apparently he gave him permission not to be there. That just came out. So he gave him permission not to be there. Then he said how upset he is. Then he comes back, and the next day he goes, I wasn't really upset. I'm upset when anyone misses. So they're cracking up. And now you think about this. Now, obviously, if Allen gets hurt, they're gonna win 7 games if he gets hurt early, right? Okay.
Your boy Flipper's the backup now.
Oh, is that right?
Kyle Allen.
Oh, the better.
They still have Matt Barkley, but Kyle Allen's projected.
I'll take either of them. Third stringer or Flipper. But well, wait a minute. One of them's Flipper, and one of them's Little Flipper. Which one was with the Carolina? Is it this one?
I think it's Kyle Allen. Yeah.
Yeah. This is Flipper. The other
was Little Flipper.
Little Flipper's guy was at Cincinnati. He fumbled
Brandon Allen.
Yeah, Brandon. He fumbled like every third time. Are they related?
I don't think so.
But their kinship of their small hands.
Spirit-wise, yes.
Not a good backup situation.
No.
We can agree.
They let A.J. McCarron go and took this in favor of it.
Now, here's the thing I think. Here's the thing, Steve, I think that is really sharp. What's the odds of Buffalo being in on the number 1 seed, like with 3 or 4 games left? I mean, they might be 2 games back. I mean, it doesn't feel like they're a number with all the talent in the AFC. Someone's going to get hot.
And what's you got 2 teams better than them already. All right, Cincinnati, Kansas City.
Yeah.
And you've got the potential that a Charger type of team could go crazy.
And you have the
Miami.
And the two teams in their own division.
Yeah,
the
Miami,
Jets and Miami.
Yeah, there's lots of candidates of teams that could.
I mean, talk about a tough division.
Yeah.
I mean, if New England's your easiest one, that's a tough division.
No doubt.
So in general, the strength of schedule is going to depress it a little bit. But I think this is a team that only cares about the playoffs. If it gets to be that there's 3 or 4 games left, or they got 3 teams ahead of them, maybe let's say 2 teams ahead of them, I think that not that they're going to give up. I think they're mentally they're going to have a break, because let's not forget that Hamlin situation. I mean, has there been any who's the second most drained team over the last 24, 20, let's say 30 months, right? If you add in, let's think of how many months that would be. So it was 2 years ago. Let's say from the time in that KC game. So that was January to this January. So really we're looking at, it will be like 19 or 20 months. It will be from the 13 seconds to the middle of this season. Now think about this. 13 seconds, you give up a Super Bowl in which you probably win. It would have been the first Bills Super Bowl ever.
Yep.
And then you have this Hamlin situation, which apparently they're still talking about. I mean, he's playing now. They're saying he looks like you couldn't see on the field he looks any different than he did, which is great. I mean, for him, for everyone. But I mean, it was the biggest deal in the world. I thought it was like, it didn't make sense to me how big it was. Because people, but again, it doesn't even matter. It's what they, and I talked about that at length. It's what they felt, and again, they knew. I think it made sense. It was a big deal to the Bills, right? Because this was their coworker, right? So, and it happened in an unexpected way. It's one thing if someone's like an alcoholic and you hear they got killed in a drunk driving accident. It's horrible, but it's like, we saw that coming.
Like if Fez ran into the door and knocked himself unconscious, died, and a paramedic came and woke him up,
and we just were like, shh, the pod's gone.
We wouldn't have continued the pod. We would have had to stop.
At what point would we have stopped? I can tell you this: once he got E-card away, we would have finished the pod.
Would we have?
Yeah.
That seems terrible.
If
we thought maybe he was dead.
If he was dead, we'd do an in memorial show the next week.
Fez would want us to. Continue.
Yeah. The friends of Fezzik would be selling pigs too.
Luckily, Fez would never run face first into the wall.
Of course not. Now, RJ. Everything you say, I agree with. Yeah. I only have one question for you, and I don't know if you can answer this. And I'm sure you recall.
Go ahead.
There was irrational exuberance about the Bills at the end of last year. Example, like when the Bengals were hosting them. The Bills were favored late in the year when they were already showing chinks in the armor. What was going on there?
I don't know. Remember that was the Hamlin game.
Yeah.
It was in Cincinnati, and the line got bet up to 2.5. Yep. But I'll tell you this, it was a very different perspective in the playoffs, playing that same Cincy team. What was the line, 4.5?
I don't recall.
I thought it was 4, but it was a neutral, though.
It wasn't
neutral.
In the
playoffs.
In the play. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is it literally was like 2 points. Can you look that up, Mackenzie? It was 2 points more.
Yeah.
So at some point there was a reevaluation of the Bills.
Yes.
Buffalo -6.
Well, that was the opener, but I'm almost certain.
It got bet down.
I think it got down to like 4.5.
But still, how interesting that so Buffalo clearly was perceived to be the better team. All right, even after they lost in Cincinnati, they were losing in the end of the first quarter, Cincinnati. But now,
after one drive, they were losing. So the game was pretty much over. We know that.
Well, but
Cincinnati was -185 live betting to win that game. So Cincinnati was a clear-cut favorite. So I think that's
a lot of money being bet. I mean, meaning that they were willing to take tens of thousands of dollars to say our number's right.
Yes. But now this exuberance is gone. Like you said, RJ, with Buffalo, Cincinnati's perceived now to be the better team.
All right, it looks like it was more towards. 5.5, even 6 is out there. Huh.
Yeah.
Okay. But even 5.5 is saying 3 point, Bills get a good home field.
So 2.5,
especially in the
at
cold.
Cincinnati, and 5.5 at Buffalo. So only a 3-point adjustment. So there was a downgrade for Buffalo.
I think for sure.
Yeah.
But here's the thing to think about. If you look at the division odds, in fact, Mackenzie, look this up. It might take you 3-4 minutes. Is go to the historic division odds and find the week before Lamar got hurt. I can't remember, week 8, 9, whatever. Baltimore was like -180. And Cincy was like plus 170. It was like extreme. Like they had the same record, and it was. And I know Cincy had a tough schedule for sure, but there was like Baltimore was like Cincy. Remember they made the Super Bowl, but everyone thought they were lucky.
Yeah.
And then the first half of the year, remember Chase was out for a while. They got blown out by the Browns.
The new O-line wasn't working.
Yeah, and from there on, Cincy had an amazing run. And I think there's been a total reevaluation of Cincy, especially because they've been beating Kansas City.
Yeah.
And I would make the case there, just real quick, is if you forget about the Kansas City games, Cincy hasn't really overperformed. And like in the playoffs, you remember, they almost got beat by the Raiders 2 years ago, that first game, right?
Yep, clinging to a 7-point lead.
And they almost got beat by Baltimore without Lamar.
Tennessee gave away the game against them.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I mean, but it's
turnovers.
That was a coin flip kind of game. So my point is, they somehow, and Big Lou, their DC, seems to have the kryptonite, at least to some degree, from Mahomes. Other than that, Cincy, it's not like they've been dominating all the time. I think they're a good team, but there's been such a reevaluation of them. Like you said, at the end of the year, the Bills were 2.5 at Cincy, and now Cincy's considered to be the better team.
Yes.
So that means
massive adjustment.
I mean, 4 to 5 points, or let's call it 4 points adjustment. That seems like a lot over what?
Yeah.
But a lopsided playoff win.
Yeah. But that was a and apparently they're saying that's lingering with it. This team knows this is their last year. They can't do it next year. So
I think you're right. This is their last year, and also like their room for error is less than it has been in the previous years. Like the team, I don't know if is as good as it's been the last couple of years.
Well, they're getting older. They lost that linebacker that went to the Bears. Edmonds. Who have they picked up? I mean, in theory, we'll see what White does at corner. I mean, he was a head case. I don't know. They say it wasn't physical at a certain point last year. But cornerbacks, once they lose a little step, they get, it's scary being out on the island like that. I can see that point. I mean, cornerbacks usually go from elite to they're not playing anymore. Like, remember the Carolina, what was that? The Carolina cornerback? What was his name?
Josh Norman?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was like as good as anyone, and then he's like
got in that fight with Odell Beckham Jr. and it's all over.
My last point would be this:
the Bills brought in Leonard Floyd. Remember?
Who?
Leonard Floyd a couple weeks ago, pass rusher. He was with Von Miller when they won the Super Bowl with the Rams.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, we'll see.
Lost their number one running back too.
I mean, let's be honest. Is what's the odds? And again, I don't know when it's going to happen. That there's not made. I mean, you look at the age on this team. You look at Von Miller specifically. When's the last time he hasn't been hurt? Like, what's the most games he's played? Because I mean, the year he got traded to the Rams, he hardly played for Denver before that. They thought that's why it looked like such a bad trade. Now he's going to be like 26 months older come time for the playoffs.
His eyes are already failing, right?
Is that right?
He's wearing glasses all the time.
He's always worn glasses, Fez. Like,
but I think
I don't remember him wearing glasses 4
he's
years
literally
ago.
always worn them. He wore them in college.
It's Super Bowl or bust. If they don't have a chance for the number one seed late in the year, do you think they're really going to be sweating those games out, or are they going to? And
but with only one number one seed, that's a big difference.
Or one bye.
Thank you.
And my last point would be this: something happened to Josh Allen that he became a very different player in I guess it was after that Green Bay game, if I remember correctly. It was a Sunday night game, I think, and he threw like 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter. You remember that?
I don't remember that being a turning point. I remember that being a disaster game.
Well, I mean, they still won that game, but
bad game for him.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, if you look, I mean,
I'm looking up his game log now, see what happened beyond that.
Cincy's schedule was difficult. Cincy had Chiefs. Okay, but I don't. Oh, okay. So as of November 29th, so this is post Thanksgiving. Baltimore was minus 250 to win the division at 7-4. Cincy was minus or plus 220.
Wow.
At 7-4. So think about one has a tougher schedule. Cincy, Lamar's still healthy.
Right.
They didn't consider these to be even close to even teams. Mm-hmm. So now Cincy, I mean, I think Cincy might be a little overrated. That's an interesting thing. But to me, the Bills, I just don't think what team has ever when a team wins what team has ever won 3 straight Super Bowls? None. Right? But how many teams have won 2? A lot. Mm-hmm. right? There's something about you can keep it together one year and then you can keep it together the next. But the Bills were like a Super Bowl or bust even. Because remember, the year before, they got beat by Kansas City bad. And that whole year was a lead up to we're going to beat Kansas City, right? So you could extend it all the way back to that beating they took. Remember? You remember that, AJ, right? And then they lose that. And now they lost their DC. Now you got their wide receivers mad. Like, if he's not worried about the Super Bowl then as much as his catches, what do you think's going on with the rest of the team? And now we got McDermott as the DC.
I think you're making some poignant points here that Buffalo's a fade, and you're looking within their division, and it looks like trouble ahead. Everybody else is looking like they're improved.
Now this is why it's a savvy play, because two of RJ's picks are Patriots over 7.5 and Dolphins over 9.5.
There you go.
And
they can't all go over.
They can't all go over.
And let's be honest, we're looking for tail results in this, right?
Yes.
So the odds, if somehow, and let's be honest, how much can Buffalo go over this?
Yeah.
They can't go over very much. So it's,
one maybe.
Yeah, to me, I think you either go over bad teams or under good teams is the way to protect yourself.
It's interesting you say that because that's the direction I will be heading shortly.
If you say Josh Allen stays healthy all year, what's the floor for the Bills in your mind?
I think they could be. I mean, this is a little bit of an outlier. I think they could be 9-8.
Okay.
I mean, so I think you could pick up that. But again, we never can imagine what happens. Like, who could have imagined the Rams doing what they did?
It was difficult.
Yeah, I mean, so to some degree, some of these teams, and let's be honest, if they start losing bad, who knows what's going to – I mean, if they get out of the –
Brady was healthy, right? Tampa only won 9, right?
Yeah, that's true, too. That's a weird thing, too, because it's like really – you look at them now, they're saying they're the best team without a quarterback in the league. Like, they can't tear it down because they got too many good players. So I don't know. But that was going to be my last point is I do think that there was a correlation, obviously, to extreme result. Now, in theory, there could be a reverse correlation.
Sure.
But to me, I think there's only so much downside for New England, right? There's only so – and I think Miami, to be honest, is the sleeper team of the entire – I know I did them last week.
Oh, yeah. As long as Tua's, able to play, I agree.
And
they could go 15-2.
And they're heavily favored to sign Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, which I think would actually be really good. I mean, they're saying Cook wasn't worth the money, but it's like he's still a good number 2.
Nobody's saying
number 4.
Dalvin Cook can't play at 28.
Yeah,
no one's saying that.
So we'll see. I mean, listen, this is it for Miami. They are in cap. They're like $60 million over the cap next year already. So I mean, this is the 1 year thing here, and they're going all in. And that owner's like 90.
How can you be $60 million over the cap? Shouldn't it be a cap?
Well, what I'm saying is they got to start cutting people. They got to start moving money. Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts? Does someone? I mean, I guess in theory, just how good the counter argument would be. The Bills were considered the best team in football by far, all the way up to the very end of last year. Really, what's changed? Right. Personally, I think I've addressed that. But
Lost to DC.
Yeah. Well, they got shoved out. I mean, in a way, he got shoved out because the coach said, "I want your job."
I don't think he's shoved out because there's like everything I read today was, and I actually read about Leslie Frazier today was that. There's still the door is open for him to come back next season.
That's what they say. That's what they. Why would he come back next season? Why would he leave? Who's the other coordinators is taking a leave of absence?
I don't know offhand. And to your point, after that Green Bay game, so Josh Allen's QBR last year was 71.9. After that Green Bay game, he had 2 games that was above his season average.
And how many below?
Counting the playoffs,
yes.
9.
Whoa. Whoa. And all those horrible games were counting the season average.
Yeah.
If you actually sum it up to Green Bay, maybe look at it. You don't have to weight it. Just look at it up to Green Bay, and count Green Bay in the.
Green Bay was above his average.
Okay, so
he was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the first 7 games. He was above average. above that his season average.
Well, by
Mackenzie,
definition, he's got to be.
Mackenzie, do me a favor. Just put we got it in our super sheet. Just give me a mean. Include the the Green Bay game with the early season.
Got it. Cool.
All right.
I think you brought up a good point, though, in terms of the stress of the past couple of years.
Yes.
Like you call it the dream crusher scenario, multiple in different situations. But this is it. Like, how many times do we see a team that's favored to win and then favored to win again and favored, but they never do it? And not only do they never do it, they don't even get to the championship. And it's like sooner or later that's got to weigh on you, and
then
you're
the
done.
history of Buffalo.
Yeah.
They've never won a Super Bowl. They make movies about it. A movie was made 24 years ago called Buffalo 66 about the futility of living in Buffalo and rooting for the Bills.
Well, the weather's so nice, it makes up for it.
Well, it's not San Diego. But I mean, AJ, you're our expert on the futility of the Bills. I mean, that's painful, isn't it?
Yeah.
You start to wonder, did you do something wrong?
I mean, I know I didn't do anything.
No,
wrong.
but don't you sometimes wonder how you're cursed to be rooting for a team like that?
Yeah.
Exactly. See, when you think that there's some metaphysical curse going on.
The worst is everybody says, like, you're from Houston, Texas. How'd you end up being a Bills fan? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know why I did that.
Because you like Jim Kelly.
Yeah.
I know, but it's
Makes
like
sense.
in hindsight, it's not worth it. It wasn't worth it.
Like 20 years ago, there was they dubbed in the Bonnie Tyler song "It's a Heartache," and they talked about like certain franchises, and they changed the lyrics to saying "It's a heartache rooting for a team you know must lose."
Well, you as a
Bengals fan, I was
you
gonna
kinda
say.
And I feel that way. You know, it's like deep down, it's like, we were happy we made the Super Bowl.
What are you, a Giants
Jets
or
fan.
Jets.
So I mean, you got a Bengals, Bills, and Jets fan. There's
So,
nothing but futility here except for RJ and Mackenzie.
Well, what, huh? He wasn't a San Fran fan back in Joe Montana's days. When he's rooting for a team, well, Denver, he got some. All right,
Yeah.
we'll give him that. But otherwise, amongst the show proper, not the support staff, we've got support staff. I mean, that's what's the producer? I mean, he's talent on other shows.
Yeah, that's true.
Support staff. Why is that bad?
I didn't say it was bad.
But like Fez makes a face like, oh. What should I call him?
Swiss Army knife.
He can do everything.
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. All right, there you go.
He's not Swiss.
No. Let's think of
Thanks for clarifying.
just to clarify.
I was curious.
That might be one of the funnier things you've ever
seen his
said.
23 and Me or what? Like, how do you know?
We need to save that drop. Just use that random
He's a
point.
Swiss Army knife. He's not Swiss.
Just the he's not Swiss part.
It's more impressive even that he's a Swiss Army knife. But let's think about this. Combined, there's 0,
Yep.
0, 1, and then there's 6.
Must be nice.
Pittsburgh looks good this year. The more I look at him,
Season win just got bet up to 9.
I believe
in
it.
some spots.
I believe it.
Money coming.
I was a little
Buddy
skeptical.
Coward's on him. He likes
Oh,
him.
well, there you go. I was a little skeptical about Pittsburgh because they have won a lot of close games. But, man, that draft. And, again, I'm not one to pick the draft, but when you get that equity, you got to consider it at those key positions. Oh, man. There was a question that was asked on what show was it? It was on the Athletic show, Football Pod. They said if Patrick Mahomes went to every team, like just one at a time, though, in 32 different or 31 different additional universes, how many teams would be a top 7, let's say top 8 Super Bowl contender? Like on the Steelers?
Who wouldn't he be
Yes.
on?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a short list.
Well, who-
I think it's much easier to say who wouldn't be, and those,
Right, so-
those I think
The Texans.
Yeah, you
Texans.
I
I think
agree.
The Bears.
Arizona.
Arizona's debatable even. Like,
No, I think not. I
No.
mean, Arizona's been torn down. But, okay, let's say 2, I think. I think Tampa, they're right up there, top 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm talking about teams that wouldn't be.
That's what I'm saying. I'm
Yeah.
saying these are the borderline.
Raiders.
Titans.
That was one they mentioned as a questionable one. But, I mean, with Adams, the D's pretty bad. Maybe not.
Yeah, he can't play defense.
maybe Titans and Commanders.
I know, with Vrabel.
Yeah, well,
First of all, I think
I really think you
Commanders
got
are pretty good.
I think you got to look at it like
or decent, I think.
he can't play defense, so like
But how important is defense? Just so you're not horrible.
Yeah, but these, yeah. So I think,
Tennessee's not horrible.
but obviously, like he doesn't. A team like the Raiders that wins right now in shootouts, they don't win often, but when they do win, it's in shootouts. You know, their defense is the Raiders' defense is awful.
I'd say he makes 27 at least teams a Super Bowl contender.
Yes.
Yeah. Chargers for sure.
They might be the only team to say no.
Oh, that'd be crazy.
Hey guys, if you enjoy our content and want even more videos from pregame.com, hit that subscribe button right now. I promise you, you will not find better sports betting information anywhere else.